Does it not want to? Does it not want to connect? It might not be connecting.
Hmm.
Why would that be? Let's see here. Oh, looks like we're good.
Okay.
Okay. Well, hello, Christopher. Welcome, everybody. Well, I guess we don't have any viewers yet. They'll get on.
All
I
right.
know TC told me he's gonna be watching. But yeah, so obviously I'm Sass. I'm running for Congress, as y'all know, and today we do have a special guest, Christopher Hatton from Copiosis. Um, I'm actually just gonna let you tell the people, who you are and what Copiosis is about, and we'll just get going.
All right. Thanks for the opportunity, Sass. It's a pleasure to meet you. My name is Christopher Hatton, and I am from Michigan. I live in Metro Detroit, and I have a background in policy and economics, and business. And um, during the day, I work at the Michigan House of Representatives, and um, now kind of shifting full time into uh, copiosis, which we'll definitely get into. It's an in-depth concept and lots of questions that I have for you, and I know that you have for me. But we can start off by just laying down a conceptual framework, and um, when we think about um, things like value or money, which is the thing that we exchange for other things. Um, there's a very specific way of accumulating it in the world today, and that's usually in a centralized manner and can reflect on something that we call economic development or GDP, and not much leeway of any kind of centralized redistribution um, has been able to make it to the ground level for the most part. So we'll get into um, the mindset shift that we're trying to create, which is if we have a paradigm where we expand on these rules. So instead of earning money just from working and performing labor or performing a specific task or performing any other kind of thing that would be considered a something that you would do for a job. We are definitely trying to leverage um, eventually all human action, and in doing so, create a scenario where um, a new system with new incentive would be able to not only change mindset, but also action and behavior on the other end. Because the more positive net benefit is created for society and the planet, the more award you get. And so that's kind of in a nutshell, but we can get into some very specifics. Um, and it's a socioeconomic step change because we're trying to say there's a lot of value created in the world that doesn't get paid for. And when we think about things like cryptocurrency and volunteering and redistribution policy, we think about you know getting money further down to flow down more, which it doesn't now. With the circular flow model in economics, money flows up. Um, so I can get off into the weeds pretty easily, but I want to get to know you a little bit. So tell me about you, Sass.
Yeah. As we were just talking about before we went live, so Christopher's and lives and works in Michigan. I am like most Austinites. I am not originally from Austin. I'm actually originally from Michigan. Moved down to Texas a while ago. Try to find my next chapter in life. I've been here for a while, and I think I found it. Yeah, so I mean, my most of my working life was like in restaurants, server, manager, the like, and it was just like lost both of my jobs a day apart from each other at the beginning of the pandemic, much like many others, and just kind of watched the country collapse in real time, and I was like, you know what, I can do something about this. So I'm running for a laundry list of reasons, but I think I just like to describe that as kind of the catalyst of like, you know what, this it's time. I got to do something here. So I'm doing something, and that's that. I don't know. Have you had an opportunity to check out the campaign site at all?
I have not, but I
Oh,
will definitely uh, land on there and check it out because I'm it's I love people who take the initiative to create change, and it really sounds like you want to do that.
yeah. Let me here. I'm just gotta refresh the chat. It's been freaking out on me. Um, yeah. So yeah, I'm not gonna like pull up my website or anything right now, but just see. So the way I described it, my platform has four main pillars. So universal basic income, voting systems, government accountability, and directly addressing division. Now, I'm super excited to talk to you about Copiosis because I talk to techie people all the time. Conversations about cryptocurrency always come up here and there. You always get the people with like those niches. And so I but but you run into a lot of people who are very bullish on Bitcoin, and I'm not a fan of Bitcoin specifically. Um, there are a variety of reasons. What I found is that a lot of people who like Bitcoin are really like on this thing of like getting away from government controlled currency. It's a decentralization. Like, great, I agree. In the information age, fiat doesn't make sense. Just like generally, right? The whole point of money is to facilitate the exchange of goods and services. But fiat doesn't really do that anymore. It doesn't do it better than we could do with information. Um, and so but the thing that I think happens is people get lost on like they're so dedicated on getting away from government controlled currency that they forget why. And there are a lot of reasons, but I think that the biggest reason is because fiat now the primary thing that it does is just create and contribute to inequity in society generally. And Bitcoin doesn't solve that problem. Bitcoin tends to carry over the inequities of fiat. Well, if it's carrying over the inequities of fiat, why would we want Bitcoin? Not to mention all of the technical problems that it has and how terrible it is for the environment, how power hungry it is, and all these other things. And so I've been just trying to put it out there in either of like people who know a lot about cryptocurrencies. Hey, what cryptocurrencies do you like that are like have a focus on equity? Copiosis seems to be one of those, from my perspective, which is really cool. So, could you speak on that a little bit about Copiosis?
Yeah, so remind me to talk about your platform after I speak about
Oh yeah, yeah,
cryptocurrency real quick.
yeah. And I will
Um,
connect. I will eventually connect UBI to cryptocurrencies, but we'll get
I
there.
I believe right, and I so with I'll just backtrack a second here with Bitcoin. I don't disagree with that. Bitcoin does not solve inequality, and I believe inequality is the top reason that unhappiness is created in the world. Um, However, it did birth a few things into the world.
Hmm.
Um, because Bitcoin is a combination of four different technologies, One's cryptography, which is, ancient, and then you have proof of work, which is the algorithm which takes up all that power.
Hmm.
Then you have peer-to-peer, which is, as old as we are. And then you have blockchain, which, had many iterations, but couldn't quite solve that double spending problem. So the way I see the blockchain revolution that had started, that can definitely facilitate some of these decentralization mechanisms to stratify the inequality. So, um, what I mean by that is, um, in open source, there is a decentralized decision making apparatus, and it can be engineered. So, your best idea on how to um, get as much one equals one as possible. I think that's the best way to say it. Um, is in the works. So we've seen a migration from proof of work to proof of stake. Like, proof of work is how much whoever holds the most hash power decides what goes on. Proof of stake is whoever holds the most money decides what goes on. So that's the same system that we have now. But now we're starting to see these liquid forms, like weighted proof of reputation, weighted proof of um, you know honesty. So there's these theoretical, and some are in beta, that are able to identify modern day scams, and then kick people off the network because of that identification. So what does that say towards the future? I think that we're starting to get to the true, what's called Festival of the Commons, which is opposite of Tragedy of the Commons. So, are you familiar with the Tragedy of the Commons in economic speak?
I mean, I've heard the term, but I think it'd be good for you to lay it out.
So, Tragedy of the Commons is the scenario that's laid out is you have grazers, with their cattle that eat grass, and the grass is fertile, so more grazers come in and let their cattle eat the grass, and then at a certain point, all the grass is eaten, and then all the cattle die because there was no cooperation. So, Tragedy of Commons states self-interest will collapse an economy if there's no cooperation. And then Festival of the Commons, which we're now starting to see in open source, is saying participation alone will not only make you better off, but everybody else who's involved with the system better off. So that is a plus sum game, and those don't really exist in our world right now because it's all zero sum.
Because of the way it's
So,
designed, not because it has to be that way. Important note.
right, exactly. So the power pillars, as I see them, are government, markets and business, religion, nonprofit, and then there's other, personal power, violence, trickery, lots of things, and other um, spirituality. But they designed the system from the society from which we live, and a lot of it centralizes power and authority and decision making. And we find ourselves in a situation where more and more of the things that we engage in on a daily basis are really starting to consolidate that power upwards. Even searching on Google, talking if your phone's next to you, like we're doing now. Some of the apps that you've left the microphone on are listening to that, and um, then they use that data to benefit them, and at our cost. So it's a system where the money that exists in it, we pay fees to move money around in that system, which are prices, and then we have, um, it's hard for people to get the money itself because there's not enough jobs for how many people there are with this design. Um, so that just shows some inherent flaws, and um, uh, in our situation, crony capitalism. So
Just real quick, I just want to like this is the thing I talk about a lot. It's like the definition of these three words: job, labor, and work, and like how I want to evolve them and where our thinking is around them. Like, and as you said, because the way the system is designed, there aren't enough jobs. It's because of what we look at as a job, and so like this is a philosophy I talk about all the time about like I want to leave jobs in the past and I want to expand the way we think about work. So I just wanted to interject a little bit,
no,
but keep going.
that's that's fundamental to the Copiosis philosophy, my friend.
Hmm.
It is, and that's exactly what we're trying to do um, with Copiosis. And so um, I think Copiosis is not a cryptocurrency.
Okay.
We're not going to have a blockchain. This is going to be a like an internet of anything kind of situation. It's going to be like a post blockchain um, innovation where we're trying to redefine the notion of value itself, um, where there's no exchange, but you can still have specialization. So in supply demand economics, you can't have one without the other. And that's because of the accumulation of power and wealth, because you got to have an incentive to do it in the first place, and that's to get money. That's the incentive that we all live by. So we'll get deeper into Copiosis in a minute. You mentioned part of your platform as participatory. So that is interesting in my opinion, because I believe that's exactly the mechanism that we need to be able to not only budget but vote on bills, on laws, not just for people, but people voting on laws themselves. So if we get participatory budgeting, participatory allocation of the budget, and participatory voting, then we're starting to see this situation where um, power does come back to a local level, and you are working for your constituency. Because I know in my work, it's like we get all kinds of phone calls and emails and letters and stuff, and with the budget that we're provided, we do the best we can, but it's not nearly enough, and that's at the state level. So um, calling your representative, writing them a letter, emailing them is not enough anymore. You have to go. Like, my opinion is, you have to go to the Capitol and you have to stand in front. You have to show power in participation. So, but we're definitely groomed to not participate and to kind of just live our own lives and participate in the system that's designed for us to spend money and mechanical amusements and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, go
Yeah.
ahead.
So I kind of want to touch on this. The So you talked about like emails and phone calls. Like, yeah, these are private channels that can be ignored. It needs to be like there needs to be a public continuous feedback loop. That's at least the first step. There's more after that, but so like this is one of the things that I'm gonna do when I'm elected. I'm going to get a seed fund to build hire tech firm whatever to effectively build a public platform, open source, where constituents in my district can log on, verify their residency, and they can talk about local politics and be anonymous, do whatever. But the main feature is that every time I vote on a piece of legislation, they'll be able to approve or disapprove of my vote on that piece of legislation. So they'll be able to see the legislation, some education about it, kind of a plain English translation of it, why I voted the way I voted, and then I will have a public scorecard of how representative I am of my district. right?
That's so
And
cool, man.
it's not just the legislation; it's other things that I do too. Like other
Yeah.
actions that I take in the world and in the country can be put on there too, up for approval or disapproval. And like I said, it's open source. I'll be the guinea pig, but once we've worked out the kinks, this can be applied to every single elected representative in the country without their consent.
So I agree. I agree 100%. And I've thought of the same thing.
Nice. I
Almost
love it.
exactly the same thing.
And this can also be used to introduce proxy voting into the world
Yeah.
as well.
Oh yeah.
And
That's
that
what I'm
can lead
saying.
to liquid democracy. And then once
Exactly.
we have liquid democracy, then when the people have control over the legislative branch, as representatives are replaced with representatives who just say, I'm just going to do whatever the people say, rather than actually taking hard stances, if that's the way that people think, who knows? Human psychology is weird. But then that opens up the possibility of like, what if we wrote like a huge constitutional amendment to replace Congress with a sortition based citizens assembly that writes legislation that is then voted on nationally using liquid democracy? It's like,
Yeah, that would make lobbying null and void.
yes,
It would.
exactly.
Hmm.
So like this is very distant in the future. This is not like, I mean, this is a many years down the road thing. But I see this as just a path toward that kind of future. Um, so like I'm definitely with you that like this we need to get away from like just about all of the way this representative democracy isn't working for some very fundamental reasons, and we need to move on to the next stage. We need to leverage the modern age. We need to leverage the information age if we're going to make that happen.
So I agree. And so another piece is you said voting. So I believe there's three, well, two real things that need to happen. We need to change um, how we vote, and then we need to change the medium. So the mediums that we use now are like early voting and absentee, and then going to the polls. We need to have a system where we can use our phone or our PC. And then at the same time, we need to be able to, um, like with what happened with Georgia, should have been an automatic runoff on that stuff, So, um, but that's just my opinion on it. But I'm like, so just full disclosure, I am a conservative. I grew up as a conservative, and I work for the Republicans in Michigan, and so I'm having a spiritual awakening, which is shifting me towards this post partisan mindset where I'm seeing that oh, it's just a revolving door of lobbyists. So how often do the people get what they want? Like maybe 10% of the time, maybe. Um, but since the government uses state and local government use a budget, and you can only take a certain piece out of that budget. A lot of it goes to special interests, corporations, lobbyists, wealthy people. So um, that's why I'm saying with mechanisms like copiosis and other decentralization mechanisms, um, in my opinion, you can cut the cost of a public good by 10x without sacrificing any of the quality of it. So then you can scale to the need and spend way less money than we're spending now. So there's some fundamentals that drive this um, consolidation, spiking of power and influence. Um, that I'm really excited about what you're saying because um, it's not working. It's not. And I hear you on UBI, and I'm definitely a fiscal conservative, and I have my own opinions on it. But I see a lot of things happening in the world, including both positive and negative deflation. So meaning there's a good deflation and a bad deflation. Um, the bad deflation is um, you have to liquidate your inventory and sell at lower prices, so GDP goes down. The good deflation is marginal cost heads towards zero, more people are able to afford it, GDP goes up. So there's a lot of good things happening on that good deflation side that are starting to hit the ground level. So I'm a researcher of abundance, and I try to um, quantify and identify behavior changes that would be plausible to individuals that engage with goods and services that are subject to abundance, which is part of our core philosophy at Copiosis. Um, when we say the necessities are provided for, meaning uh, the necessities would be food and water, clothing, shelter, healthcare, and education. So all five of those pillars are subject to decreasing marginal costs right now. And it's all on the back of renewable energy. So abundant energy is the key. And we can get into this later, but, and I know, Texas is one of the leaders with wind energy. So that's very,
We've hardly even tapped into our solar potential too.
right. So right. So if we're able, so for voting again, sorry, on your platform, if we're able to, um,
I want to clarify when you talk about when I say voting systems. I do believe in voting at home. I will just say, all right, and we can get into this, that like voting from home on your phone over the internet is a far more complex issue than people think it is. Like there's way more to it to ensure the security of it, but like it is, we can, there are ways to do it. Um, and then but my main focus when I say voting systems is our current first past the post method that we use, the choose one winner take all, is horrendously awful. The mechanics are terrible. Um, I'm currently working with the Center for Election Science to get approval voting in Austin. And I also work with the Equal Vote Coalition to help spread star voting as well. So those are the two methods that I push for. I talk about them all the time. You can find them on my website and all my YouTube clips. I constantly go on about voting methods. So I don't know how much you know about that stuff, but
no, I agree. I think all runoffs should be automatic. I agree with that.
well, so it's not, that's, if you're using choose one ballots, an automatic runoff doesn't make any sense. You're just picking the winner. There's not enough
Yeah,
information.
with the score. Yeah, for sure.
So you're talking about star voting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, when you start looking at things like election codes, when you look at like small jurisdictions that don't have a lot of money to like redesign their ballots and retrain their poll workers and stuff, like star can run into some roadblocks, and so approval is also a great option to have.
So there is an organization called Secure Internet Voting. You can go to secureinternetvoting.org. His name is David Ernst. He has solicited California and Colorado. The state legislatures have approved that type of voting should be allowed in the state, and they've begun to solicit counties. So, and that's just one company. So it is happening now. So, in my opinion, there's no reason why anybody but you should know who you voted for. So if there's a way to automatically validate that your vote was counted and it was counted right on your phone, I would be for that. And blockchain, secure.
Yeah.
Um,
I will say for me, one of the things is like, I'm of the opinion that that electronic voting, or like for at-home voting, or I should say over the internet voting, that's the better term, over the internet voting should be restricted to early voting, and in case something happens, then election day counts as the kind of final like redundant ultimate paper backup. You can tell people, hey, something got messed up, something got spoiled, there was an attack, there was a failure, bug in the code, whatever, and you can tell people, okay, your vote was null and void over the internet, come to the polls on election day and vote in person. Um, and so I think that is I think that that's a really key piece for redundancy, in my opinion. And it also is just another piece of this puzzle too, is like this idea that we have like an election day is just dumb generally. Like our ballots are so huge now, like it's ridiculous to tell people like you have because you can't take your phones to the polling places or whatever. It's like, okay, now you have to like memorize this list of 40 candidates that you have to go and mark correctly. Like it's absolutely ridiculous. And as
It's a job.
what?
It's a job.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, and it's
work.
like you should be able to like do it at home, sitting on the couch, call up your friends, go through, like check them against their website at the same time. It's like so whether it's a mail-in ballot or it's electronic, at-home voting is a way to empower voters. Absolutely.
So, and okay, we're aligned
Mm-hmm.
mostly on that. I would agree with contingencies. I would agree with
Mm-hmm.
that. So, but your ranking system for elected officials, I think that is an important piece because then
Not
you have
rank. Star is scoring, not ranking.
no,
So
I'm talking about your open source thing. So they can
oh, the
approve or
approvals and
disapprove of your
disapprovals
vote.
for actions. It's more about like you have a scorecard of how representative you are.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like you can compare different candidates to other candidates if you want, but fundamentally, each representative has their own scorecard.
so then it would be like, do they align with my interests?
Do they
Because
align with
they're
yeah? I mean, all the data is there. It's all open and available, and so you as the voter are free to go through and make your own decisions based on the
and,
information that's
and
available.
and you know what that does for people too? I would argue it frees them from partisanship
Mm-hmm.
and ideology in a way, and creates their own political home.
Mm-hmm.
Which I'm an advocate. I'm a pro polypartisan advocate. So um, I think we need more than what we got for sure. Um, but I know we're getting in the weeds a little bit. But you wanna ask some questions?
Yeah, yeah. Let's come back around to copiosis. So tell us again, like what is copiosis? How does it work? Because you've already stated, okay, copiosis is not a cryptocurrency. So what is it?
It's a socio-economic and economic platform. So Copiosis is not a political platform. Um, what we're trying to do is relieve pressures from this design of society off people's backs so that they can do what they are passionate about. And how do we plan on doing that? There is a complex algorithm which it's been written, um, that would measure, more and more human action, uh, and see, and then, take the net of those actions. So all people have good and bad in them. So bad isn't going to end. Just bad is not going to be awarded anything. So the more bad you do, the less you're going to be awarded, and it's going to show up, in your digital wallet. So there is a digital wallet. So you do accumulate MBR, and MBR is for what we call luxuries. So if you want to equate it to what we call standard of living and quality of life and well-being, um, providing necessities, so food, shelter, water, healthcare, education, definitely lifts the standard of living. So you don't have anything taken out of your individual budget, and your standard of living is going up. So that doesn't exist right now except for redistribution policy from government. And there's no tax money with Copiosis. This is true abundance. So abundance comes from multiple factors, including mindset shift, technological advancement, and realization is a mindset shift. But um, it comes down to love and compassion and mutual connection. So if it's saying, oh, I know that I'm going to be awarded MBR for doing this, is that going to be an incentive to do it more? Possibly, and it's so that's another driver is when a realization comes that if I act this way more and more MBR comes in and I'm able to purchase more luxuries, which are anything outside of the necessities, um, my quality of life is going to go up tremendously because I'm going to be able to engage in things like travel and leisure, uh, you know, uh, other material things, and um, but it's like everybody will get to their level, of bliss. What we call in economics is a bliss level, and utility. So it's like, how I'm going to take as much as I want until my utility is met with the necessities, and then with luxuries, it's like, oh, I need to do more good action. So good action meaning the net benefit to society or others around you or the world at large is greater than what you're taking away from it. And the planet. So the planet is our mother, and the planet is hurting right now. And it's because of the design that we are engaging with. And it's heartbreaking. Um, but we're starting to see single individuals with genius innovating and creating systems that are tackling some of these global grand challenges. And I know Perry Gruber, our founder, is one of those people. Um, but you're starting to see it sprouting all over, um, including the young man with cleaning up the oceans. I forget his name, but it's really a remarkable thing what
Oh
he's
yeah,
doing.
the plastic. Oh gosh, what is it called? There's a really cool name for it. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, yeah. So, and then there's but then we have the horror stories. All like, oh, but there's methane in my water supply because of fracking. Um, oh, but we need to frack so we can have cheap energy. And it's like, hold on a second. But when we talk about exponentially developing technologies, solar is decreasing in cost quicker than any other one out there. So part of the initiative I'm working with here in Michigan is to get rooftop solar here. But our utility companies are like, oh no, we're going to be 100% in control and you can go yourself. And it's like, okay. So, I have to stand toe to toe with these people, arguing it's like it's bigger than you. It's bigger than Michigan. It's bigger than the United States. And then you see these records being set all over the world for purchase power agreements that are now down below 2 cents per kilowatt hour. So it's like 1.5 cents per kilowatt hour is the cheapest one out there right now. And so soon but there are subsidies built into those. So soon we're going to see 1.5 without subsidies, and I think by 2025 we'll see half a cent with no subsidies. And that what that's going to do is unlock abundant energy, and that's going to unlock a number of abundances as a result, because there's so many things out there that are energy intensive that we depend on, that lock up value, in a centralized form. So what Copiosis would do is say, we don't need to tear anything down. We don't need to force anybody to do anything. We can exchange MBR one for one for any dollar that you have. There's no debt. So this is a big piece. The system we live in now with debt, interest, and inflation is broken. It's broken. And honestly, the level of inflation around the world right now it frightens me. Because, and just Yesterday, the PPI came out, the Producer Price Index. And it said month over month, 1% inflation. That's double digits for a year. So that's outside of what the Fed can control. So we're losing some of the strength to some of the strong bonds in the system right now because we're printing so much money. So that's one of the things I say about UBI is I'm all for it, but we need that good deflation for it to make sense. That's
Yeah,
my opinion. Totally my opinion.
let's talk about UBI. So there are a lot of things about UBI that I like. Kind of my ways, two favorite things are guarantees your right to life because we live in a country that currently runs on money. You need money to live in this country. I don't like it that way, but that's what it is. It's our reality. And it knocks down at least one foundational barrier to every problem we've been failing to solve for the last 40 plus years. Um, one of the things that you had stated would be necessary for copiosis was a abundance mindset, which is the short way of saying UBI is a step toward something like copiosis. Is like we're never gonna get something like that until when people's basic needs are secure and they have a lot of money and they're not fighting over it anymore. Um, then people can hopefully people will start to care about money less and care about each other more. And that's I think a really great stepping stone, and it's going to help culturally to open up the possibility for the kind of shift to copiosis or something like it. Um, and so that's what I that's like very high level. That's something that I really like about UBI. There are a lot of other things. It has a lot of really great immediate effects as well that are really great, and it helps to unlock the ability to cover some other things. But yeah, down the road, eventually, I think UBI also helps to provide a better path toward strengthening our universal basic services, of which they're not very great in the United States. And so universal basic services are that combined with, of course, things like um, depending on how you define it, like you're talking about basic needs, and so it's like dependent. You can mix what UBI is being used for in part, things like housing and healthcare, with some universal basic service. I'm sorry, housing and food with like healthcare and transportation, and you mix all that together, and you start to reach the things that you need for copiosis. We just got a comment in. I just want to read it real quick. Um, why do you think people with UBI will care about others more rather than complain because they want more money? Because it's a basic income. So it's because it's this foundational floor. It's the same for everybody. $1,000 a month, $2,000 a month, whatever it is. Um, and you can't lose that money, and that money is going to, like I said, guarantee your right to life. Um, it's not going to be about like, and it's like you have to reach that threshold, right? So one of the really key parts about poverty, I don't like putting a number on poverty. I think that's stupid. In my mind, poverty is when you are in scarcity mindset. It's when you're in survival mode. Your brain shifts, and you're not able to be. You become much less productive. You're not able to plan for the future, and your focus is just on what do I need in order to get through the day and get to the end of the week and the end of the month, rather than well, okay, what do I want to do with my time? What do I do with my life? What do I want to explore? What kind of journey do I want to go on? And universal basic income can pull people out of poverty directly in a very direct way, and it can shift people from a scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset. And when people are in an abundance mindset, um, like I said, hopefully, I think that will help people to care about money less and care about each other more. That's the hope. It's, of course, I'm trying to predict the future of human culture, but that's
Right.
that's my prediction.
And Sass, I commend you for it. I think you have a great mind, and I would say um, I would agree with most of that, except my fiscal conservatism and inflation is just,
Right. So we're
I'm
not
ready.
printing any money to pay for it. So it starts. So a perpetual UBI does need to be sustainably paid for, and so it starts with a value-added tax. What I'm proposing, I'm fighting for $2,000 a month. Andrew Yang fought for 1 grand. I think that made sense in 2019. That was like 50 years ago. And also, we live in the real world. We don't get everything that we ask for. If it came to the
This
forefront,
is,
yeah,
I hear you. I hear, and so that's the difference where copiosis is different is, we don't take from or force anybody. So that's going to be the difference in a socioeconomic
right,
change
yeah,
because
yeah, yeah.
it's
The
not
taxes. It's
not
our
out of a
taxes with it.
government budget, right?
Yeah, I
Um,
want to get there though, and that's the
you
thing.
will,
I
you
won't,
will.
and I'm saying like, I think UBI is a necessary step to get there because you need to get people
So
into that abundance mindset.
let me tell you a couple things.
Okay.
I think you're 100% correct. I think that right now, corporations are asking two questions. Um, how quick can I automate and how many jobs can I eliminate? And
Mm-hmm.
this is happening right now. Unemployment's above 6%. It hasn't gone below that since we hit this pandemic situation, and that's troubling. Another piece of this is, um, in corporate jungles and in highly innovative places, individuals are acquiring skill sets every 8 months now. And as those skill sets are created, a new idea or a new task or a new job is created, and then they have to train down. But then there's this automation that's catching up, but it's eliminating more jobs than are being created by this convergence of skills. So I would agree 100% due to technological unemployment, UBI will be, not only an eventuality, but I think it's going to happen. I argued it would be the first 2 years of 2030, but I think it's going to happen sooner now. And we're
This
starting.
pandemic has accelerated that by a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we're seeing pieces of it with the stimulus checks,
Mm-hmm.
because um, that's what it is. But I think by the end of uh, the next two presidential terms, we'll have a monthly stipend coming in for everybody. But I mean, well, we'll see how it works out. But I'm assuming the original proposal is going to be for everybody.
Yeah, and this child tax credit, who knows? Like that. I mean, if that goes, because that is just in the form of monthly checks to parents. If that actually happens and it's perpetual, um, like I see that as a major stepping stone to a true unconditional basic income. That is, I mean, that would really, really just be like one step away. Um, so yeah, yeah, and so it's like I want to get to a world where UBI just isn't needed. It just doesn't make sense anymore. And in order to get that, we need it first. It's kind of counterintuitive, but we got to get unstuck from where we are. And so that's why. Like I'm everything. It's always the caveat of like in the United States right now. Like what do we do right now in the world to move forward? And it's like it doesn't need to be the end game. It just needs to be what's the next step. And so I see UBI as the next step. Cool. So I want to talk about the algorithm a little bit. So you said it's a complex algorithm, and so there's this question of will complexity push people away from it?
So there's multiple convergences happening with the algorithm. We know about the Internet of Things and sensor-driven economy. So there's going to be a lot of sensor-driven data flowing into the model. We have wearables now. Like I don't have my ring on me, but I have an Aura ring that measures my sleep, and I have a Halo band. So there's going to be a lot of health data coming from the wearables, and um, you know, I believe there's going to be there. Well, we can talk about the sensor economy later if we want to, but that's half. The other half is going to be all right. So what is observable? How do your peers see you? Can there be a consensus mechanism that drives a proof of reputation, weighted or liquid consensus about being judged by your peers without any of the punitive centralized mechanisms that we use now when we have judging. So, what is the idea is to say um, we want to be able to capture the impact of an original scene or setting or thought or action as it goes on. And it would think about it as like uh, uh, an origin and then royalties or residuals that would sprout from that if there's a convergence that affects other people or the planet after that original action or thought is made. So yeah, it's a lot of it's going to be under the radar. So a lot of it's going to be built in. Um, so I think the complexity would definitely scare people off if they tried to understand every aspect of it. But I think by observing human nature in I guess our profession now, um, you know, results drive action. So if people realize that they're making more or less of this by doing something, they're going to continue to do it until.
I like that. That's interesting. Results drive action. That does make a lot of sense. This is like a whole thing with voting reform. Is like the argument for approval voting is that like star voting, which is a pretty simple method, is still too complex or something. Um, and it's like there's just this big question mark around it because it seems like people get really excited about star, but are is there a bias there? Is that just a certain subset of people? Is it not the general population? But I think you're right about this results drive action. I think that does make more sense because you can look at other countries that have more complex systems, and and people don't understand what happens to their vote at all. They don't care. They just go to the polls and mark what they want, and they just let it go. And so it's like, which is to a voting reformer, it's just somebody who's super interested in voting science and these nitty gritty details is insane. Like I would never want to vote. Like I would. Are you kidding me? I'm gonna vote and not know what happens to it, right? That's crazy to me. But like, I'm probably an outlier. And other people may say that they want to know, but in reality, they're content with just as long as they could be expressive on their ballot, and it seems like it's bringing in like it's selecting good results. That's the thing that they care about. So I think I think that's another argument in favor of star over approval, which is these are the kind of the top two. But bringing it back to the topic that we're talking about, yeah, I think that is a valid counter argument. That you know what, like if you want to get into the nitty gritty here, you can read up on the specific algorithms and stuff if you're into that kind of thing. But if you're not, just generally it's like the more good you do in the world and the more good you do for the planet, like the more NBR you're gonna get, and people will be able to see that because they'll have that digital wallet and they'll be able to see exactly what they're getting, which I guess that makes it really simple and interesting. That's so I guess okay. So I guess what I would want to talk about next is implementation. Like how do we get people to take on this wallet? How do we make it happen in the real world? What is like the timeline? Like how do we get in some capacity, how do we get from here to there? So we've already talked about abundance mindset, but like in terms of the technical thing, real quick, somebody asked, is there any white paper or GitHub account to see? If you just go to copiosis.com, they have everything. They've got plenty of white papers. They've got a ton of information. You can read through all of it. But go ahead, Christopher.
Yeah, so the bridge, the how is it's not as complex. There are some strategies, and we have pillars that we're working with right now And two of those pillars are municipal governments, so starting at the local level, and then engaging with industry. So being, uh, getting use cases and then adding to those use cases over time. And, at the speed of digitization these days, that's, when people realize that, oh, wait a second, we're not doing anything differently, but we're accumulating MBR and we're able, so that's one of the factors there. And then, our pilot projects, we're starting a pilot project in North Carolina here pretty soon. And there's definitely a lot going on the ground there, and a lot going on online also because of the COVID situation. So I will go into detail with that offline, because it's a lot of um, there's a lot of things that aren't out in the open yet. But um, it's really exciting to think about the possibility there, and it's going to create this notion of the festival of the commons. So in a way where there's going to be an economy that reinforces itself over time with the use of MBR. Um, so at the municipal level, since it's not going to cross the whole world overnight, you know, it will be parallel with the current system for a time. So the idea there is, it implies a few things, like having a reserve where you can convert it to dollars um, until all the merchants accept MBR. So there's these you know these doors that you have to unlock and you have to play with the current system to be able to do it. So that's why we're saying we're not here to destroy things or force anybody to do anything. They're just and I guarantee one country, and I think it'll happen this decade, are going to say we accept all cryptocurrencies as legal tender. And as soon as that happens, boom, we're going to start to see this uh, just proliferation of political allowance. And I think it's. What do you think? What do you think about that idea?
I mean, I had mixed feelings about Tesla taking Bitcoin. Like I was super excited because I was like, wow, that's gonna be big for like moving away from fiat. It's like this is a big company. They make big sales. They're consumer focused. They're very visual, out in the open. They're super public. That's great. But why Bitcoin? Like, why it shouldn't have been Bitcoin.
So I
Um,
can I can I can answer that. I've been following it pretty closely. And
well, I
this
know
isn't
Elon Musk
fact.
is.
No, I mean, well, MicroStrategy and Mass Mutual did it before Tesla did it. So this isn't new.
Yeah, they're not
Uh,
the first, but they are super public, and that makes a difference.
that does make a difference. I'm not going to argue with that. But even Jack Dorsey did it before Elon Musk.
Did
So
he? I think I do
Square
remember talking about that.
Square
Oh,
converted
right.
1%. Yeah.
That's right.
And then Miami put it on their balance sheet. So it's starting. It's not going to stop. It's going to accelerate, and it's going to be on countries' balance sheets, treasuries. It's going to hit sovereign funds and pension funds. It's going to hit central banks. It will. It's monetary energy, and the way we use monetary energy today is very, very centralized. But what makes Bitcoin different than any of our past currencies or current is that um, the demand is not dependent on the supply. So, um, which is weird, because it's like it can go up to $1 million. There'll still be the same amount of Bitcoin. So, but companies, publicly traded companies, now have a profit and loss strategy with Bitcoin and a balance sheet strategy with Bitcoin. And it's for two reasons. And the first one is the inflation of M2 money supply, which is more economic jargon. But Our M2 money supply is up 26% year over year, and it's been that for a year. So what does that mean for companies that hold cash on their balance sheet? It means that their inflation rate is closer to 15 to 20%, meaning that if they don't convert their cash into something, they're not going to be able to do, it'll be worthless in 2.5 years. So it's like, so now then it's like, oh, we usually do uh, stocks and bonds or precious metals or real estate.
Right, they did. I remember in their press release, they made it sound like it was something like they made it sound just like it was just an investment to hold value. That's what it
So now
really made it sound like. Which
that's
is
so people are like, oh, it's not a store of value because it goes up and down. But the people that think in Bitcoin see that the higher that price goes, the less volatile it's going to be. So there is no volatility in Bitcoin if you think Bitcoin. Um, but we'll see. That's the future. It's not right or wrong. Um, but I totally get what you're saying. It doesn't help the bottom of the pyramid, the rising billion people. Does not help them. Some of them it does. Like it's empowered women in Afghanistan to take control of their own money. It's empowered people in Venezuela and Argentina to be able to send money without remittance. So there are use case benefits of Bitcoin. But we don't really see them here because we're a highly developed nation.
hmm,
Um,
interesting.
yeah, but I am a proponent of Bitcoin. I am. Uh, I've been studying it since it came out, and I don't believe it was for 2008, 2009. I believe it was for the crash that's yet to come. So, you know, and I believe that the amount of money that we're printing right now is going to enable that crash. So that's just my opinion, my doomsday crap.
Yeah, I, I,
But
I did I disagree with the amount of money we're printing. Real quick, I want to answer one of this person is commenting. Why not Bitcoin? It's the best money we have so far. Stas, I still wonder what you would consider better for Tesla instead of Bitcoin. I'm not sure what I would consider better. I just don't think that Bitcoin is if they're taking it also for sales as well. I just don't think Bitcoin is like Bitcoin brought us a lot of great things. I don't think, and we talked about this at the beginning of the stream. I don't think that Bitcoin solves the most important problem of fiat, which is that it it's the primary thing that it does is it contributes and creates inequity, and Bitcoin tends to carry over a lot of the inequities of fiat, at least in the United States. As you're telling me, it's a little bit different around the world. But in the United States, it tends to carry over the inequities of fiat. And in my opinion, the biggest reason we should get off of fiat is inequity. And so I would love, like I said, I don't have a pick necessarily for what cryptocurrency I think would be better. I don't think the answer is Bitcoin. Um, and so, but what was the thing you were just talking about? And I want to respond to that.
so there are publicly traded companies that are starting to invest, and that's going to take off. That's not going to stop. That's
Oh
going to
no, we
keep
were
doing.
talking about the crash.
Yeah,
So have you heard of uh, capacity utilization?
capacity utilization.
So capacity it's pretty simple. It's an oft ignored concept in economics that is actually really important.
I mean, I'm familiar, like, yeah, like I use wind turbines and solar panels to discuss that. It's like the nameplate is 5 megawatts, but it's spinning a certain amount of time, so you're only getting 60% utilization on that.
Kind of, yeah, and it's the amount of stuff we have that's made that can be bought versus how much of it that we're buying, and so
Yeah,
it's just that percentage. Um,
right.
and so right now it's around 75%. It dipped as low as 65% back in the 60s when we first started measuring, and it was comfortably over 90%. and it's just been on a downward trend ever since. Now, it's important the reason why that gap is there. If it's because people are afraid to spend money, then printing money and injecting into the economy is going to cause inflation or hyperinflation. But if the reason that people aren't spending money is because they don't have money, then you're not really going to see that real inflation that leads to price increases until by just putting money in the hands of consumers until that capacity utilization gets closer to 100%. So I disagree. I don't think I don't think we're printing enough money right now. I don't believe in unlimited money printing. I don't. But in moderation, I think that we have that buffer there, and I think that buffer could be really powerful in getting the UBI started, and just getting it going and just paying off people's debts and all of these things. And as we work into a more perpetual, sustainable funding mechanism, which I have laid out on my website, but we don't have to get into that right now. So I do disagree with you on the printing of money is going to cause a crash. I don't think that's going to happen for that reason.
Okay, I think it's fair. I think that's fair. And we can move on to the next subject. And it's
Sure.
good to disagree. We are I can tell we are on if I mean like as a conservative, definitely on opposite aisle of some ideas, but moving away from that into my I call it my pro polypartisan
Yeah.
initiative. Third party politics, yo. So my bad. So no, I think it's healthy, and I think we'll probably hit a few more of those for sure.
Okay.
um,
Go ahead. What were you gonna say?
so I think I think when we're trying to categorize money, um, I mean, what's a better word? Define money. Um, we always in me with my economics background, I always go back to, the origin of value, and money used to be shells or pebbles or precious metals and coins, and then we started to get this inflation happening because people would chip away the metal and make new coins with it that looked like the coins. But I think we've entered a new era of money that is backed by mathematics. So this is an important piece. When we talk about the algorithms that are involved with cryptocurrencies and other new types of currencies, like what Copiosis is trying to do, we back it with mathematics. So we remove trust from a central that we depend on the centralized entities that we use now. So we swipe a card, you know, all the fees are built into the prices that we pay, and we pay those fees to move the money around in their centralized system. Um, some of these open source blockchain initiatives are automating away that centralized mechanism through not only smart contracts, but um, the decentralized decision-making apparatus that blockchain inherently creates. So when we're starting to see this use of Bitcoin, and I know we're broken record on that. When it first came out, it was the scammers that take advantage of it, and that's usually what happens when a new form of money comes out. Credit cards, scammers got that. When we went to paper money, scammers did that. When we went to gold coins, scammers did that by clipping out pieces and creating counterfeits. So, um, but now we've moved to this next chapter in Bitcoin, which is okay. It's been around for a little bit. More people know it. It hasn't hit 100 million users yet. So can you imagine that? There's not 100 million people using Bitcoin actively right now, and the value is tremendous. So there is a network effect that is definitely um, You can speculate on that kind of stuff. But what am I getting at? What's my point here? Um, Bitcoin, I don't believe Bitcoin's ever going to be used as a currency. Like, even if merchants accept it, I think it's going to be used as a store of value. I think it's going to be
Mhm.
digital gold. So that's why we're seeing all the power players interested in it now, because it's paying more than any other asset out there. So when you average the return, it's up over 100% year over year for the last 10 years. And a lot of that happened in the last year here. So, but when you average it out, people, that's how companies are looking at it now. It's up over 100% year over year because a lot of corporate debt is long term. So we have this decentralized finance movement going on right now, and they're starting to propagate mimics of corporate debt. So what does that mean? That means they're wanting to absorb all of that monetary energy into a decentralized finance mechanism. And what is that going to do? That's going to create a situation where lots of money is to be made and propagate greed. But at the same time, there are certain DeFi spaces that are saying, hey, how are we going to get the little guy involved here? How are we going to get those fees of engaging with this service down to a level where anybody can do it? So those problems are being worked on right now. And if anybody can gain exposure to these types of markets, then we're talking about servicing humanity instead of just a portion of the pyramid. So there is a focus in innovation on that bottom of the pyramid. And some of it's brought on by finance, decentralization, and some of it's brought on by exponentially developing technologies that are hitting marginal cost declines that are coming close to zero marginal cost. So there's a lot of things happening at the same time, which are enabling individuals to raise their standard of living without affecting, largely not affecting their budgets. And there's only a couple of things right now that actually can do that. But if you use like the cell phone as an example, the smartphone specifically, um, it has absorbed so many technologies into it. So what happened to all that research and development money that went into producing all those other devices? You know, it's now all consolidated into your cell phone because you can think of anything. So now any possible thing can be turned into vapor and uh, developed as an application that you can download from the App Store and put on your phone
Mhm.
through a centralized mechanism. So decentralization is also starting to open source manufacturing, and they're starting to open source digitization. I mean, that started way back when with Apache and Linux. So, uh, but if we start to see open source competition where devices that enable people to get an education given away for free and connected to the internet. So if we start to see Elon saying, we're going to give a portion of our bandwidth away for free for
Mhm.
anybody to use, what is that going to do? That's, in my opinion, that's going to open up genius deserts because there are geniuses that live and die that never get exposed to our world.
Mhm.
And if they can start to merge their ideas with some of the developed nations' ideas, they're going to sprout this entire new form of innovation, which is going to start to be like leveling the playing field because this person that was in a desert is, because they weren't connected, there weren't any infrastructure to get those ideas melded together. That area is gonna benefit just as much as a developed area. So um, there's some profound things happening right now, and a lot of people just go by the wayside and say, "I'm just gonna I'm just going to get my information from here, you know? So it's like, it's a singular source. Um, you got to get like imagination and um, trying to get information from as many sources as possible, asking questions, and then the ability to adapt. Those are very, very important things coming here. And I know I went on a rant there, so please, if you have any
Yeah,
questions.
that actually made me think. So, one of the pillars of my platform is directly addressing division. There are things I want to do both legislatively and outside um, of legislative, just like in the world. Um, in terms of legislatively, what I want to do is I want to cleanly define press. Um, so I believe in freedom of speech for the individual. I believe in freedom of the press, but when I think of press, I think of freedom of information, not freedom of misinformation. Now, there is no algorithm for truth, but if we can separate off all the political commentary and the entertainment and put it into this other category, that we can also then moderate, which we've been doing forever, right? We used to not allow cigarette commercials and other adult content on Saturday mornings. That's how we ended up with Saturday morning cartoons. And we can say, okay, you can, as a media outlet, you can choose what you want to be or what programs are what, but you have to very clearly state, like, this is press, this is not press, and have it displayed on the screen. And so
Yes.
people get to decide what they want to engage with. Um, and,
So
th-
I,
and then what I want to do is I want to work to decouple press from the profit motive. And
nice.
that's non-trivial, but I think a really powerful thing we can do is having low conditionality funding for local and investigative and independent journalism. And that has a lot of great effects. One of them, coming back around to the thing we were talking about, is a decentralization of narratives and a decentralization of sources, which I think is really, really important and really, really powerful.
I love you, man. Straight up, that is beautiful what you just said, and I believe that there are some mechanisms which can provide for some of that right now. And there's when the Ethereum token came out, it came out with two features largely. The first one was called the ERC20 token, which is the platform from which you can write smart contracts on, which created this notion of decentralized autonomous organizations and being able to automate paperwork streams. Um, and then the other one is called a non-fungible token. So non-fungible token is, collectibles, but um, we're starting to see this movement into digital art and even music and some smaller clips that can fit on blockchain. But now we're starting to see these arguments about business use cases and decentralized sovereign identifications. So, what does that say? That says that, oh, if we're talking about news, for instance, an original story that comes from a trusted news source can be confirmed automatically that that NFT is indeed coming from this source, you know, then it's
Oh,
like
okay. I was
then
like,
it's like, oh, fake news is no longer a thing after that, unless you like it.
yeah, it's interesting. And I would say that saying fake news is no longer a thing is a bit of a stretch. It'll find a way.
Straight up,
Um,
straight up.
but but um, but it was like when I started learning a little bit about NFTs, I was like, right now it's a meme, but I know there have to be some really good use cases for this, but I just don't feel like sitting down and figuring it out. So I'm glad you told me about using this to verify information sources. That's really what it comes down to, and in the scope of news, that actually makes a lot of sense. I really like that.
Yeah,
So yeah, that's really interesting. That's there's 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 so much that like innovation that can continue to happen. It's so crazy because like a lot of this is just happening in software using generalized computing devices, or or I don't want to say tangents, but like right next to generalized computing devices, in terms of hardware. And so like that's the thing that's like so crazy is like we really are in the information age because of like some of the things that we're doing like we're always possible. Maybe some of them were like dependent on computing power, but in terms of the actual like code itself, it's like it just took time for people to figure it out and come up with it. And it's like, man, how long have computers been around? The internet's been public for 2.5 decades. Think about how much further we have to go, which is of course why we've got to replace these representatives in Congress who still live in the 20th century with people who live in the 21st century, who live in the modern age, and can actually hold a conversation with Mark Zuckerberg instead of talking about the email on their iPhone.
And I would argue that some of them still think that solar takes 80 years to pay for itself.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
So I
ridiculous.
agree with that. Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. And there's so much going on that it's impossible to keep tabs on everything. So you have to have a tailored like web crawler that will go get information on the things that you have initiatives behind.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm telling you, there's a lot of these bridges have already been built. Now it's just about making a use case out of it and having a good user interface, and then being able to collect data from that and having a dashboard on the internal, so you know what's happening. Um, but as far as copiosis is concerned, um, there is too much love in the world, and that is not recognized. So you share love and you lift somebody up that then performs an action that benefits other people or the planet. That is what we're talking about. That is something that we want to reward. And it starts from that action of giving love. So how do you it's like how are you going to do that? Well, the Halo band, for example, measures your tone of voice. So it knows if you're speaking with love or not. And now we're starting to see devices that are able to do this, able to measure emotions, um, and then being able to track, resultant actions. We're heading for a period of radical transparency, whether people want it or not. It's already really here. So um, I wouldn't be surprised if every single one of those Starlink satellites has a camera on it, and so there's just this constant imaging happening, and then drones are going to proliferate, so there'll be closer imaging happening, and then all of our cars are going to have camera suites on them. So at the street level, there's going to be all kinds of monitoring going on. So this is privacy issues do arise with this, but a lot of us just won't even know. So
Yeah, and there's also like there is a trend away. There is a trend away from the desire for privacy. It's not. We don't. It's hard to predict where it's gonna end. Like where it's gonna end up. If it's just like in 20 years, privacy is just dead and just nobody cares anymore, or if it's like a purely generational split, or if it just reduces and stops, or if it's like the people who don't really care today are going to start caring tomorrow, and maybe it's always just going to be people who are older care more about it, and it will just always be that way. Like we don't really know where it's going, but because privacy is being broken at a changing at a rate that is just really substantial now. This conversation around privacy is going to be really interesting, and also just like what and maybe it could just be like maybe there are just certain things that people really want to keep private, but there are other things that people just don't care about. It's like we go out into the world and we show our faces to people in public all the time, So do we really care if we're out in public and people are seeing us anyway? Do we really care if a picture is taken of us and put it on the internet for the public to see anyway? Like that's already happening, but now instead of yeah, and it's just kind of this. It's a question. I don't think
Right.
that it has an answer right now.
So, and then there's the hive mind and swarm.
Mm-hmm.
All of this is going to go towards feeding inputs into the algorithm, which is meant to, decipher net benefit, um, based on the impact. So if you have an origin of love, and then a person then goes, you know, does cliche things like pick a piece of trash up off the ground, help an old lady across the street, open the door for somebody. In our culture, that's good stuff, and it sometimes it makes others feel good also, not all the time, but um, so those are the types of things. So it's just doing stuff out of the good of your heart that doesn't get rewarded now, but it's not just that. So with the necessities being provided, you don't have to, earn a living um, to have shelter, food, or learn or have health care or clothing. So now we're saying, okay, so if I don't have to do anything to get those things, then what am I going to do? And then everybody's like, oh, they're just going to sit down and, you know, uh, be a couch potato and play video games.
That's not true. All the evidence we
Exactly.
have points to that not being true. Work is an
That's what I'm
intrinsic
saying.
part of the human condition, and people become more productive when they enter an abundant mindset of abundancy.
Right.
So yeah, that's
So,
definitively not true.
right. So some people will,
Some people will, but on the
have
whole,
A Taco Bell drone deliver their meals and play video games. That's fine. If that's what they love to do, that's fine. But that's not going to be
right.
everybody. There's going to be more innovation happening as a result of not having to, um, engage in the current system.
Yeah,
And that,
freeing people from those chains and from that slavery is going to lead to more innovation. Absolutely, and it's also, I mean, this is why I say UBI is the first step. It's the next step, but it will empower people to start businesses and to invent new things. And especially as things like 3D printers get more and more and more accessible. And people are able to do just. I mean, you can even think about like it's like it's hard to imagine automating away a plumber, but you have to remember that doesn't come in the form of a robot who comes to your home and replaces the piping. It comes in the form of like you can order everything you need off Amazon and you can watch a YouTube video and do it yourself, right? Like,
or this is, and I've already said this to a bunch of people. Um, your toilet will take a sample of it, measure your microbiome, then
oh yeah,
it'll collect the rest of it, and then someone will come and pick it up and pay you money for it because it's fertilizer. So it could be a totally different system if we just think about it differently and close the loop. So not, oh, the loop is closed when it's out, as sediment in the lake.
it's reduce. Reduce is the number one. Reduce, then reuse, then recycle. And so yeah, you're right. Closing that loop and getting to a zero waste society is absolutely essential. Uh, it makes me this is a bit of a tangent, and we don't have to talk about this. Have you done any research on reversible computing? Do you know anything about reversible computing?
Our CTO is engaged with a PhD in human computing, and that's part of it. So, but please, I don't know much about it. Please tell me.
So the idea is like if you think of like an AND gate, you bring in two bits, but only one comes out. Well, that extra bit is grounded, and you're losing that energy. That's what your waste heat is in computing. But you don't need to do that. You can actually there are a couple of different versions. So like a Fredkin gate is one of them. There I think there's one or two other kinds where like you can have theoretically no waste energy, and this comes down to like the fundamental physics of information. Information cannot be created or destroyed in the universe, and so you can physically create computing that like an AND gate that takes in 3 bits and spits out 3 bits, but it will change based on what's inputted, and you can do it for all the basic kinds of gates and more complex stuff. And so you can create computers that use uh, a very, very, very little energy, and you can always, and it also the other thing that you'll be able to do is you'll always be able to reverse all of the processes as well. And so the way I look at it is like, this is the only, as we approach these like quantum tunneling problems with die shrinkages, like, it's like Biden just signed a thing to get, to help deal with the supply shortage for silicon and everything, but it's like, we're at 5 nanometers, we're done when we hit about 1 or 2, we can't go any further. It's like I've been looking, and from what I can tell, and maybe it's all secretive and they haven't published anything, it doesn't seem like any of the big semiconductor manufacturers have been putting any serious R&D into reversible computing, because like the gallium nitride is not, I mean, it's cool for power bricks, but it's not really going to catch up, and it's not going to buy us a lot of time. Quantum computing is super far away from being able to catch up with classical computing, but like reversible computing can use like current processes and hardware. Like, it requires a rewrite of software, and it's going to require translation layers at first. But it's like, I see that as the only real path forward beyond the 1 and 2 nanometer die sizes. And I don't see any real R&D happening in that space. And I'm like, we need to get on this, because we're only a few years away. Does any of this sound familiar to you? Anything you've ever heard about before, or?
Yeah, I think so. When we talk about computational paradigms, we're currently in the Moore's law paradigm, and it has definitely matured. So it's not doubling in price performance every 18 months anymore. It's taking longer to do that. So that means that we're reaching the limitations of this current paradigm. So what's going to be the next paradigm? Is it going to be like nanotubes? Is it going to be quantum computing? Is it going to be something else? That's the question. So um, I'm not as familiar with reversal, but if that's the answer. So if we're talking about now creating like 3D processors.
Well, processes are already 3D. If the architectures already are three-dimensional, that's not what it is. It's you're redesigning the fundamental gates, so that way you're not throwing away, you're not grounding those signals and losing energy, and you can get like 100x efficiency. Of course, like, this still requires engineering, both software and hardware, but it's like this fundamental, like, it's hard for me to describe, because I'm not like an expert on it or whatever. But like, it the point is, there is a way, using current chip manufacturing, to design chips that effectively don't create, in theory, don't create any waste heat at all, right? In reality, reality is not theory, but you can get really close. And it's like, I see this as the next step after these die shrinks, of like how we can get to more efficient computing. It is going to have to be a paradigm shift, and it's not going to be about shrinking the transistors anymore. It's going to be about optimizing within this space of reversible computing.
I like it.
Yeah,
That does make a lot of sense, because I'm like, there's a gap somewhere here, with nanotubes and such.
yeah,
But it's
yeah, and
so I agree with what you're saying 100%.
yeah, and like, this is, I think, is going to be really important for like pushing computing forward, and also in allowing us to reach that energy abundance and like have it actually be effective. Because like you said, Moore's law is dying, or is dead, some people would say. And it's like, we're going to need a lot of processing power in order to compute this algorithm all the time. But it's like, if we have reversible computing and we have that abundance of energy, then I think this becomes much more possible.
Okay, so hold on one second. I got to send a message here.
Oh, you're right. Been at this for an hour and a half. All right.
Yeah, this is great. I'm having a lot of fun.
Do you know Justin Amash by any chance?
Justin Amash,
No. Okay. He used to be
the
a
rep.
libertarian state house, I think, in Michigan,
Oh
but he
yeah,
moved
yeah,
on to
yeah.
Congress, and he just finished his last term, and now he's going around telling the world
I do.
how terrible the process, the legislative process within Congress is. Opinions on right to repair. I'll answer this real quick. It's a comment. 100% in favor. I'm very black and white on right to repair. Absolutely, uh, like companies need to make their devices repairable, sustainable. They need to provide parts for consumers, but like it's not just consumers. It's also military equipment. It's hospital equipment. It's everything. It's these like really vital areas. Like we need sustainable products. We need to get away from. I don't know that there's a way to outlaw planned obsolescence, but like that doesn't mean I don't want to try. Planned obsolescence is awful for everybody except the profits of the company, and it's like, well, what about the planet? What about the people? Um, so, so yeah, want to definitely want to definitely. I'm very much in favor of right to repair.
Oh yeah, and I think so. Oh boy. So I think computational power is one of the underlying currents of this positive deflation that I was talking about. I believe that digitization is a beginning point for many of these positive deflation points. And yeah, I think that there needs to be an initiative that might be very expensive to make sure that we can continue to increase or double price performance every 18 months or less. So I think it's vital for sure. Um, and especially with the mathematical revolution that's going on right now with cryptocurrency and this new notion of statistics renaissance that is going to change the way that we make decisions.
Oh,
So
statistics renaissance. Moving away from the world of pass fail and into the world of everything's gray and everything's on a spectrum. Is that kind of a good way to put it?
yes,
That's what just
yes,
happened with voting science. That started in 2006 is when voting science moved from the pass fail into a statistical revolution, or what do you say, statistical renaissance. Yes.
yes, which will lead to um, just like you were plugging up the leaks, plugging up a lot of the leaks because we do lose a lot of things. But then there's five innovation platforms that are simultaneously developing right now, and they're these are the five. We have robotics, blockchain, energy storage, genome sequencing, and artificial intelligence. And then there's this notion of convergence. So when two or more of these converge, then it sprouts up this new technology. So like Tesla, for example, is
Energy storage
artificial
and
intelligence,
AI.
energy storage, and robotics. So it's and they're aiming to automate um, driving, which might happen. But here's another just real quick off topic. I believe that Austin is becoming an epicenter in the world right now, and people who are in the know feel that draw, and
Yeah,
they are coming there.
they're
And
paying.
and I'm feeling it. I'm feeling it right now.
Hmm.
I'm gonna come. I'm gonna be in Texas soon, and I'm gonna visit Austin, and I'll knock on that door right there. I will. I'll do it.
Oh yeah, that one. That's this tiny little 600 square foot apartment.
Yeah. All right. Back on topic here.
Talking about the convergence of the five platforms.
Yes. So now we're starting to see these innovations that are creating these deflationary pressures in a positive way. Meaning, okay, if we can get car ownership rethought and say, oh,
Mhm.
instead of cost per month, what if it's cost per mile? You know, and what if it's cheaper? So if we can equate those two, so like over the lifetime of a car that you buy or rent, how much is the cost per mile? And then be like, okay, if there is an autonomous taxi, which would theoretically be cheaper than an Uber or a Lyft or a real taxi, not as cheap as public transportation, I would
It
assume
won't,
in the beginning.
it won't be.
Um,
Yeah.
but there's this threshold where it's like, all right, for many, many people, it's going to be cheaper to get a ride than to own a ride.
Hmm.
So it's like then they're going to have those personal decisions. Do I want to have a car? Do I want it to be there, or am I going to be okay with being shuffled around by myself?
Depending on how
Um,
much you drive around, right?
exactly.
If you are driving, 1,500 miles a month, maybe it would be worth it for you to have particularly an EV that doesn't just where the transmission doesn't blow every couple of years or whatever. But if you're only commuting, a mile to 2 miles to work, 3 times a week or whatever in the grocery store, and you're in a big city, like no, it's not going to make sense for you to have your own vehicle.
Right. So, and then theoretically, if we're talking about this being on a declining marginal cost curve, I know that there's an asymptote that'll hit something that's above zero for sure
Hmm.
because you get down to raw materials like lithium and there's a certain amount you can go down.
Hmm.
Um, but then we're starting to see, okay, maybe there is an argument that it can eclipse the price of public transportation. And if that happens, did we just democratize uh, transportation for humanity? That's the question. But at the same time, Tesla accumulates this power and wealth pillar. So that's the difference between centralized and decentralized. Yeah. But they're still providing this service that increases quality of life for
Yeah,
people.
and the question is how far away is that, and also will there be other companies that manage to compete that come along the way? One of the things for me is like adapt or die. Like I hate that this like protecting the old guard and bailing out these old vehicle companies. Like let your Rivians, let your Lucid Airs come online now. Tesla has paved the way, and if these other vehicle companies aren't gonna follow along, they shouldn't get subsidies. Like they shouldn't get special treatment. Of course, this is all legislative in nature, and let those companies die out and let those employees go to these new companies that are actually like making products that the public finds conscionable. That the public desires, that has demand, that is like more sustainable, and like we got to do way more than just that to get off of fossil fuels. But like, I'm saying like this is like one of these things of like people get so upset about jobs. I want to get away from this jobs prospect, and I also like these entrenched companies that no longer have their original founders, that are no longer mission focused and only care about their quarterly profits, and have figured out that it's more efficient to just get in bed with Congress than it is to actually run their damn company.
Right.
Let those
Right.
companies die.
So you're right, and this is good. And I'm sorry, we're both political minded, and we're supposed to be talking about copiosis.
Oh, we
So
can talk about politics. We can talk about whatever we want.
all right, good. So circling back, yes, products are going to be needed in copiosis, and most of the same processes might be used. So if it does emit, that's not going to be rewarded.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's a way to be able to do the same thing without emitting emissions, I mean, greenhouse gases, then you'll get more
Mm-hmm.
because it won't have that negative impact. And same with sorry, I'm a little clogged up now, but when we're talking about um, transportation, like I've done studies on poverty, my public policy education. Lack of transportation is one of the leading causes of poverty. So you're right, competition and the such. So if we're able to alleviate poverty by democratizing transportation without taxation, then that's going to create a kind of critical mass of NBR from the origin of that enterprise. So, and then if it's EVs, then they're not going to be emitting emissions, so you get more. If it were a regular, trans combustion engine vehicle, so there's lots of comparisons going on because there's so much data on how damaging emissions are. So and we already have carbon markets in other areas of the world, so we know how much it costs relative.
Yeah,
Um,
and quick note: supply chains and manufacturing play into this as well. Like people always get mad that like making a battery is like so uses so much carbon, and like Teslas aren't even better, and it's like Tesla factories run entirely on solar, and they ensure that their supply chain is environmentally and humanitarian friendly, and they're about to just do all of their own lithium mining too, and they're going to be doing that in a totally environmentally sustainable way. So it's and again like that's specifically Tesla, but like yeah, that I know that will play into the algorithm for Copiosis, but
yes.
done
So,
with what I was saying. So
but that's how you get to the nitty gritty. You got a process of elimination and ask the questions to get to the bottom of
mm-hmm.
it. So just kind of full, uh, bringing it into a concluding argument here is the system that we operate in today sees value creation as a almost singular mechanism where you contribute to the society that's designed by all the institution and power pillars, and everything else is out of the goodness of your heart because you're a good person or not. And a lot of people feel the stressors of that system and can't make good come out of their heart because of that stress, even though we are all innately capable of doing that. It's part of our intrinsic value as human beings. And when we suppress that, we give in to, um, centralization, and we mentioned media before, and then we get manipulated by that because we listen and we believe, even though it's a publicly traded company with a board of, um, decision makers that dictates what comes out of the commentary section of the news. So, and then opinions themselves are emergent realities, and some people believe them. So then it becomes their own reality, which means reality is subjective, which is why we have paradigms in the first place. So, um, shifting from a scarcity to an abundance mindset is difficult because we all exist in a scarcity mindset. So I'd argue that most of us look at abundance through the lens of scarcity. So we're not really giving it its rightful deserve. So that's why I say you have to debase what you think you know. You have to unlearn some things. And then you have to say, okay, if abundance is real, what does that mean? And what it really means is anybody can take as much of something as they want without,
Harming others.
taking, taking away the ability for someone else to take as much as they want at the same time without harming the planet or others. So that in my opinion, that is the true definition of free will, being able to do what you want without costing anything or anyone else anything.
Yeah. The and this is why I always come back like UBI is the first step. It's like I don't see UBI as the end all be all. I don't see it as the I don't. It's not going to solve all of our problems, and I don't see it lasting forever. but it's going to be necessary to help people to unlearn some of those things. Absolutely.
Yeah. And then, so you guys want to learn more about Copiosis? There's a treasure trove of information and scenarios and, literature written by Perry, our CTO, myself, and others. Um, there, you can go to Facebook and ask to join our action group or our Copiosis social group and contribute, you know, create a festival of the commons. Participation alone should be value gain for not only you, but everybody else that's in there. And that's what we're missing in the world now. So if we can create a system that doesn't have any of the systemic issues embedded in it and incentivize people to do things that would cause positive net benefit to others and the world at large. What use your imagination to see what the result would be. If you're able to get anything that you want by doing something over and over, then that something results in a net benefit for others or society, which creates massive impact, which creates massive uh, ripple effects that affect other people down the line that you don't even know. This is starting to happen now, but it's all flowing up right now. So what we want to do is separate power from wealth accumulation, and there are some definite mechanisms that are built in, engineered into the way that MBR is awarded and burned. So that's what it is. So you don't give MBR to somebody when you're getting a luxury. It burns, it disappears. And then the net benefit of that luxury, the use of that luxury, goes to the provider over time. So it's like a residual. So just think about, and then think about that. So then and it will go on for the life of. So, in a way, it measures the area under the curve of what an actual value is instead of a supply and demand graph where the equilibrium ends up being your price. So it's fundamentally different, and abundance economics is the future. And I think to truly appreciate what abundance means, um, you have to have it comes in threes. So spiritually, um, an abundant mindset, and then know what abundance in the material world actually means. So that's how I would cap that argument. So do you have any other questions?
We just got one in the comments. So this is the person who earlier was asking about Bitcoin. Um, crypto prospector says, "I'm a bit confused. The transfer is burned. Which percentage?" Um, so I guess we didn't really talk about the mechanisms of Copiosis very much. But I remember that was one thing that when I was looking at the website that I was like trying to understand, like, wait, you pay for it, but the vendor doesn't get that NBR, but they may get NBR for having made the thing. Or so if you just want to describe like those mechanics and like why it is that way and why it is not a transfer from quote unquote the consumer to the producer in terms of the NBR, which is the would you call it a currency? Or would
I wouldn't even call it a currency. I
you would
just
not call
call
it
it
a currency?
I call it a placeholder for value,
A
and
placeholder for value. Okay.
we can argue the differences in another talk.
I'm
But
not. Yeah, I'm not worried about that lingo. Okay.
when we measure our GDP, it's for final goods. So all of that effort and cost that's through the supply chain doesn't necessarily equate, because that final good has that margin on top of it from the actual provisioning center. So what we're trying to say is each step of the supply chain is going to be creating a residual effect um, of MBR per step for the exact value of, not value added. So it's a different kind of understanding because it's usually value added with our current economic system. Um, so then when you get to the final product, um, it really is down to the subjective reality of the individual. So if they engage in a luxury and they are not okay with it, so it doesn't generate, the uh, positive net benefit for the individual or the planet, then there won't be any NBR coming from that exchange. But
That actually
so
incentivizes producers to make stuff that's actually that people that actually creates positive change in the world.
right, but the exchange itself does have what we would call a price today. So there's a certain amount of NBR that would be burned, and whether or not um, the benefit from that NBR is greater than or less than that amount that's burned from the individual's wallet depends on the enjoyment from that individual over time. So that's kind of the argument there. That goes to the vendor. So
Interesting. So it's okay. So it's the vendor gets the payment over time based on how the consumer, um, or like based on how the product performs over time.
yeah,
And that's how the quote unquote that's how the producer gains their NBR, but for the consumer. And the question is though, um, okay, so you're spending NBR on a thing and that gets burned. You're burning NBR on a thing. So I think I did find the answer to the question, but I forgot what the answer was. I was like, how do you determine what like how much gets burned for a particular product?
so the vendor sets the price, not blanket per individual. So it's a one-on-one transaction. So it's not like, oh, here's our menu. It's not like that. So there's you're able to look at each other's um, previous transactions. So they'll know how much MBR is there. They'll know um, how much the vendors charged other people for it. So it's kind of dynamic. It's dynamic.
Interesting. I'm wondering what the purpose of that is, and I just maybe a little bit more about the mechanics of it too.
So someone that has more MBR would be willing to pay more based on our current economics, but might enjoy it at this level. And then someone that doesn't have that amount of MBR that still wants to enjoy it, engage with it, might enjoy it more. So the vendor might actually get more MBR over time from charging that individual less. So it's kind of this. That's where the proof of reputation comes into play. So you're able to dynamically price things based off of previous records of enjoyment.
Interesting. I have to look into that more. Yeah, the price setting seems a little bit funky to me. Why one might go with one price over another, but yeah, it's interesting. Well, hey, I really appreciate you coming on and having this long, in-depth conversation with me. This has been fantastic. We're actually TC is probably going to take this and split it up into a whole bunch of clips and post it on my YouTube channel, which would be really great for people to watch, just like little 1 and 2 minute bites
Right.
of it. But yeah, this was streaming on Twitch, on YouTube, on Facebook, and on Twitter all at the same time. Yeah, this has been wonderful. So thank you so much, Christopher. Anything you got for me before we end this?
I appreciate you. I really enjoyed getting to know you in this conversation. I think you have a solid understanding of where we are and where we are headed and what we need to do to even get to where we should be, in the terms of copiosis and or decentralization and or uh, you know, equality. So, and then I encourage you to reach out to our founder, Perry, and our CTO. His name is Jarek, and they can go way in depth because I am definitely the political strategist. So, um, and you know I have some economic background. If you try to understand it from our current economic scheme, it's not going to make any sense. So that's why I say
Right.
an abundance economics mindset is kind of setting this bar that um, you have the necessities, but then uh, luxuries don't have to act as current brand names do today. So
Awesome.
that's
Well,
kind of, but yeah, so it's definitely in depth, and I appreciate the time, and this was really really fun. So thank you, thank you.
sweet. So, everybody, you guys can head to copiosis.com. You see it on the screen right now. You also head to voteforsas.com if you want to learn more about my campaign and everything there. But other than that, enjoy the rest of your day, and I'm gonna